This last segment for this week on how we improve really kind of it's a nice short standalone, and we're going to revisit this idea of the tale of two schools, right? And so we've been looking at ways in which we engage groups of teachers around data, from classroom to benchmark. We talked about systems in place to organize the assessment data and to use it effectively. And finally, we're really at the end of the day, it's about improving instructional practice. And so when you read the Tale of Two Schools, there are really two views on professional development, and one is around accountability. And so when we use the word accountability, there's often a negative connotation towards that, when it in reality, this view of professional development isn't necessarily good or bad. It's just one view. So just keep that in mind. But typically, when you're in a system looking at professional development with accountability, there's usually some product or something that is a deliverable that is somewhat measurable, right? And often is the individual implementing something in their classroom that they hadn't maybe been doing before. It's usually very content based, and it's usually very event oriented. So a district professional development session where everyone comes together and we're going to work on this strategy and everybody's going to do it. And yet everybody coming to that session is coming with a wide range of experiences and needs in the classroom. Uh, Often, professional development can be seen as a compliance, and not necessarily compliance of we do this, use it. Really, compliance of, well, there are 9 teacher professional development days during the school year, and that's what you're going to give us. And the state requires a certain number of Act 48 hours every 5 years, and so sometimes it may feel like it's just going through the cycle of showing up on in service. Um, Accountability can be data driven. So this is where, there's assessment results and we're going to provide professional development to everybody as a result of that. And often that's a one size fits all model. And then of course, I'm sure this term is something that you've heard before, this best practices. Some people will say, you're not doing best practice, or this is best practice. And, really, what does that mean? What are those things that you're being asked, and how does that connect with the students that are in front of me, and the curriculum that I'm, expected to deliver, and help those students achieve. Oftentimes, teachers themselves see this as like that they're going to sit and listen to somebody teaching them. They're going to get something from a session, and the teacher's going to be able to go back and use it right away. You probably can think about some colleagues you've heard, who sounded like that. Just give me something I can use, right? Not a negative, but they're often thinking that somebody in front of them knows more, as opposed to bringing them together to create something. And often there's this kind of this sage on the stage, or this outside expert who can come in and deliver a message, because a prophet in your own land is often overlooked, right? So these are kind of characteristics of professional development that's related to accountability. Whereas in the second model, we can think about, a model of engagement where, teachers are collaborating and working together to find something out, right? And to understand what's going on, to develop something that will work for them in the system that they're in. We know that it's comprehensive, right? You looking at the learning that's going on and the long-term goals that's associated, and then of course adjusting as needed. We know that's ongoing, this idea that we're in this continuous improvement, and that there's a commitment to focus on the work because it's important, and as we focus on that work, we're going to commit to it further as we know more. We know that, as compared to data driven, this is really a data informed. And so we have this set of data, and so what's going on and how can we use that to make sense of it? Because sometimes what may appear to be the issue, like in word study, for example, we know that the students' activities weren't necessarily what we wanted, but in the second to that, finding that, the teacher knowledge was there as well. So we had to look at the professional development for our teachers in addition. We know that it's context sensitive. So what will work in one classroom doesn't always work the same way, and especially for those extreme students. I always tell teachers when I'm in a professional development session, they try to anticipate, well, this is going to work for most of my kids, but what about my gifted student or my student who struggles? And now we say, well, let's plan curriculum around the majority, and then when we're planning the lessons, we can go back and adapt up and down as needed, right? And as well as the way that I may interact with one school around a topic may need to be different based on what's going on in another school. Great example of that is we just opened up a brand new elementary school mid-year, and teachers were moving in April over spring break, and they were packing beforehand and had PSSAs, and you can imagine what that was like. Granted, the school was right behind the old school, the new one. It was still very stressful. And so the professional development in that building looked very different during that time. We know that in professional development that is engaging, we're built around engagement. It's embedded in schools, and so it's authentic. It's happening with students, with teachers, and they're getting to organically create and learn right alongside your peers, right alongside your students. And just by the nature of, think of the learning walks, how interactive that was. Not only the teacher's part of, coming up with what are we looking for, what do we think the problem practice is, what's the learner center problem. They're also then going and collecting it and giving feedback to their peers, and then going back into their own classroom and adjusting in addition to that. So this idea that teachers are teaching teachers, right? And there's isn't necessarily one expert in the room. And with that, I'm going to go to this example here that I found recently, and I'm just absolutely this is something that I haven't done. I will be doing it with my high school and middle school English department for next year because they're kind of ready for it. But this is called a pineapple board or pineapple chart. And the reason that they use the term pineapple is because that's a symbol of hospitality. And so the idea is, you can see here, this is by period. You can certainly do this by time of day in your school if you're in elementary. But in secondary, you've got periods 1 through 7, and you can see that the teachers actually sign up for when they're doing something different or something that is worth being seen. And so you can see that the teachers here have put down, when they're doing, let's look at uh, Thursday, second period, we have Silva who's doing video editing in iMovie. So if I'm a teacher who wants to learn more about that and how I would do that with kids, that's where I'm going to go to learn about that. Or if I want to learn more about using Kahoot, I'm going to go to seventh period on Tuesday if I'm free. So it's just a nice way to open up the idea of teachers teaching teacher. And the link to that is right here below if you want to either take a picture, or you might be able to click on it right through the notes that for the PowerPoint. So what we're going to do now is I have, really, I'd like you to revisit the Tale of Two Schools, right? And so right at the bottom of the comparison chart that you did before part 2, just going to, in a paragraph, or maybe you just want a bullet point, respond to the values for each school they seem to possess. What assumptions do they make around professional development? Um, and if you were a coach supporting each school, how would you move them towards a data-wise approach, right? If you don't think quite there. And so just really think about a quick write here. This isn't a formal writing. This isn't something to worry about grammar and conventions, unless just make it so I can read it. So a paragraph or two, right at the bottom, and just submit that right on D2L. And I've kind of adjusted this video so that you could right away know that I've extended week 3 to June 22nd.